Your Humanities Half Hour is brought to you by the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.
Hapadays and Tiro, welcome to Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry. Well, across the nation, humanities jurisdictions are celebrating Arts and Humanities Month, and what better time to revisit the work and activities of our very own Northern Marianas Humanities Council than today. And joining us today is Executive Director Leo Pangelinan. Welcome to actually your Humanities Half Hour, Leo.
It's our Humanities Half Hour.
This is actually the first time you've been on the show since you became Executive Director in November 2018. For those of our listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I was born and raised on Saipan, but I moved away during my junior year in high school. I moved to Washington State. I lived there for 15 years consecutively and only moved back to Saipan about 10 years ago after earning a master's degree from the University of Washington.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd been here the whole time, but no.
No, I was gone for, not too long ago, half of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm back. I was recruited by the Northern Marianas College to direct their counseling department. So that was my first job moving back to Saipan. A couple of years after that, I was promoted to the Dean of Student Services position. So all in all, I spent about 8 years at the Northern Marianas College. Had about a year hiatus out of any type of career, and worked on learning how to sail with our traditional canoes and learn a little bit about traditional navigation. So I did do some voyages within and throughout Micronesia, specifically to Yap.
From Saipan?
From Saipan.
And how was that?
It was awesome. It took us 5 days to sail down there and
Only
10
5
days to
days.
sail back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I also joined a team to voyage down to Satawal, which included visiting the islands of West Fayo, Puluat, and Pulusuk. That really opened my eyes to a lot of our history here, especially with the Rafalawash people, where they come from, and the rich traditions that they come from as well as how society is organized down where there hasn't been much Western contact with Pacific Islanders. I'm also a musician.
This I did not know.
Yeah,
okay.
So I recorded a music album. It's entirely in Chamorro.
When was this?
With my music partner, Ray Manahani. This was back we got together in 2013, and then we published an album early 2014.
Okay.
Yeah, so we share our musical interests on this album. As with most all Chamorro music, or music in general, it does share stories about our culture, our history, our family, our relationships. We try to use a different genre of music on the album too. There's a little bit of reggae.
I was going to say there's got to be some reggae in there.
There's a little bit of the Spanish bailanbotsu, tune, melody.
Yeah.
And some slacky.
So you play, what do you play?
I play the ukulele,
Okay.
but I can also play the guitar. I'm mainly a rhythm player. I started writing music in earnest probably in 2008. So I was already an adult and decided, to put thoughts to paper. And yeah, as you mentioned, I started at the Humanities Council in November. That was a big shift for me. It was coming off of being out in the sun all day on the canoes, whether it be maintaining it or going, continuing with the training sails.
To being behind a desk all day in the air conditioning.
Yeah.
What do you feel are some of the major experiences or life lessons you have from your prior careers that you're bringing now into the council?
I think it's a really good fit for me being a part of the Humanities Council, because I do have a strong interest and I tend to gravitate toward the social sciences more than the natural sciences. And I think that's what grounds the humanities. We draw on, methods that social scientists use to understand, human society and our experiences and to reflect on it, rather than the scientific method, which uses empirical approaches to understanding natural phenomena. So, my interest in music, my interest in traditional navigation, these are forms of art that have been influenced over the ages. I look into my past and our past to make sense of the present and, how we move forward in the future. And that's uniquely a humanities approach to understanding our world and expressing ourselves. It allows us to be creative, to tap into our creative side as well and express that. So I've always been drawn to that. Again, as opposed to like the hard sciences, the natural sciences. And I mentioned, I was a counselor, and I also directed the counseling program for NMC. I was also a counselor at the University of Washington for a time. So, when you're working with individuals and groups in that role, it does enrich your understanding of human problems. So, I think that's what I bring with me as well. Those interactions I've had with people trying to come up with solutions or a greater understanding of the problems that they find themselves in. It all relates, I think, to coming back to understanding our experiences and giving it meaning. And through programs that the humanities have, really giving it value to others as well by sharing it.
Well, the slogan at the council is navigating the human experience, which is very much related to what you're talking about in understanding ourselves and how we relate to each other in the world. Give us a recap, and we've talked about this before on the show, but this being Humanities Month, of what the purpose of the Northern Marianas Humanities Council is in general.
So we do have a mission statement, and if I can remember it correctly, I'm going to try and say it right now on air.
This is a test.
Yeah. So, our mission is to promote an awareness, understanding, and appreciation for the humanities as they relate to our indigenous cultures. And I can come back to what that means to me. But also to use the humanities or create educational programs and services that address our community's needs and intellectual interests. I know that sounds like a loaded statement there.
Mission statements are always loaded.
So what does that mean to me, to break it down? The humanities is a combination of all these social science fields like philosophy, language, literature, politics, religion, art, music, human geography. How do people move around and settle and group together? And so drawing from all of that literature, reading about our past, Shakespeare, to better understand, who we are as characters, right, in life's play, if you will. Shakespeare, he brings out those elements in us understanding, how humans behave, how they think, how they express their emotions, how that drives them. So literature can give us that. And so how do you relate that to the indigenous cultures here? Well, we live in a place that where we recognize and we honor the fact that it was settled and continues to be settled by a unique group of people, unique groups of people, Chamorro and Rafalawash. So it behooves us to use those disciplines to have a better understanding of their way of life, their aspirations, their knowledge base. So it can inform how we live today, with our indigenous people, how our indigenous people themselves can take stock of their history and culture, their past, so they can build on that to have a better future, to have a more meaningful future, not just for themselves, but able to pass on those traditions that have worked well. And there are potential for it to continue to work well, or perhaps be acknowledged as ingenious, right, in terms of how we live our lives here on our islands. So that's sort of how I see us relating the humanities to our indigenous cultures, to our intellectual interests and needs. We all, I think, inherently have these interests that play to our creativity, our curiosity. We want to better understand our world, and sometimes science can't give us that, or sometimes we need to question, we need to critique what we understand, what's happening around us, our experiences, in order to better understand who we are and where we are. It all sounds very philosophical, doesn't it?
Every time I chat with you about whatever the project is, you mentioning that you have a counseling background, I can understand now why sometimes our conversations get very intellectual and deep about how people are reacting to the programs and things like this. So it's good to know where you're coming from. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about, or a lot about, the number of activities the council has planned for the month, and a little bit about what's ahead for the council. Shall we?
Yes, sounds good.
We'll be back after this break.
Did you know that you can donate up to $5,000 to the Humanities Council through the CNMI Education Tax Credit Program? Donations from individuals and corporations qualify and can be used to offset your local wage and salary tax, BGRT, and earnings tax. Call our office at 235-4785 to see how you can support humanities programs in our community and obtain a tax credit for your donation. Sizuus Maasi, Olomai, and thank you.
Welcome back to Your Humanities Half Hour. Our guest today is the Northern Marianas Humanities Council Executive Director, Leo Pangelinan. October is CNMI Humanities Month, and there are quite a number of rather intriguing programs, it looks like, coming up. And actually, a couple of them have already happened, correct?
Yes, that's right. We've had a proclamation signing. We had Acting Governor Arnold Palacios sign a proclamation on September 25th proclaiming October to be CNMI Humanities Month. We've also had a training for teachers. We're trying to launch National History Day in the Commonwealth. This is a national initiative. Most other states or jurisdictions have a National History Day program. And what that essentially is encouraging our youth students at the high school level to come up with a history-related project. They can use different mediums to do that, different methods. They would compete then regionally, so within the CNMI, and then there would be winners of that regional competition that we would like to support to go off to the national competition in Maryland.
What are the parameters of this competition, or the goal? Is it to like highlight a particular part of our history or a particular event? Does it have to be related to the Commonwealth, or? Well,
there's definitely. I mean, we want to go with the students' interests. We want to default to that, but at the same time, we are encouraging students to look into the history of our place, the history of our people, because I think that's what would be most meaningful to them in our context, our local context here, but also when they, for those winners that choose to go and are selected to compete nationally, it helps to showcase little known information about our part of the world, right?
Yeah. Commonwealth of the United States, yes.
So it's a way to also promote the Commonwealth out there nationally,
right.
In terms of our history and to some extent, I imagine our culture, the way we live here, will sort of come out in some of these history projects. So what we did with the training, which occurred last week, was we had invited and identified teachers and advisors to help these student groups with the competition. And so we brought Joe Quinata from Guam. He's a part of the National History Day program there.
Oh, okay.
And he has been graciously. He graciously took a flight here to visit us and trained the teachers for about 4 hours last week, just to get them more knowledgeable about the competition, the program itself, the kinds of projects, the methods students can use to create a history project, and then just to give them the tools that the teachers need to be able to support that. So that's what happened last week. Moving forward, we have a number of activities to showcase our indigenous languages, to showcase some historic sites in Garapan. We will have, again, the Sangabao Poetry Competition. We have that annually. We also have the Governor's Humanities Award annually. If I may, I'd like to highlight some of the activities that are new. The Essence of Po, Traditional Knowledge of the Rafalawash People. This is a presentation by Cecilio Raukiulipi and Lino Olopai. They are both traditional celestial cultural practitioners, navigators. They will be presenting on the Weriang School of Navigation, the processes they go through that school, to be able to learn how to navigate using celestial bodies, our environment, and just the knowledge base that's there to be able to sail thousands of miles without modern tools, navigational tools.
And it really is so much more than just looking at the heavenly bodies, as I understand. Like you said, looking at marine life,
yes.
Or seabirds that they encounter, or currents, the roll of the waves, where the waves are coming from. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And that's on October 8th, correct?
Yeah, that's on October 8th at 6 p.m. at the American Memorial Park Visitor Center Theater. Presentation will likely go for about an hour, followed by questions and answers.
For another hour at least, probably.
Probably not that long, but you know how things go. And then for the languages, Chamorro and Rafalawash, we have put together dates for a panel of speakers to talk about sort of the state of our language, its use. What are they individually, or as part of their respective organizations doing to promote and preserve both the Chamorro and Rafalawash languages. So the first panel presentation, which we're calling Nalala Finutsamoro, that is scheduled on October 9th, Wednesday at 6 p.m., also at the American Memorial Park Theater. And then for Rafalawash, we're calling it Amalawa Malilil Rafalawash.
All right.
That will be on October 29th, Tuesday, 6 p.m. at the American Memorial Park.
And who are these panelists? What groups do they represent?
So far, we're still trying to solidify the panel for either presentation. But for now, for the Chamorro language, we have Lady Diane Torres. She'll be coming to talk mainly about her work publishing books in the Chamorro and Rafalawash language. How that's working out in terms of the reaction she's getting from the community. I imagine she'll also talk about the challenges and successes of working on those kinds of projects.
And these books are mainly, if not entirely, written by school children, which is so incredible.
Yes, that is awesome. And we also have Jonas Barcinas. He's the head of the Chamorro Carolinian Language Heritage Studies with the public school system. So, of course, we all know there's a bilingual program in the public school system, but I don't think a lot of people understand sort of their goals and objectives and how they're trying to integrate language with history and culture in that program, and some of the successes and challenges in doing that inside our school system. So Jonas will be there to talk about that. We also have Roman Tudela Jr. He's the executive director for the Indigenous Affairs Office. He's doing a lot of things in the community. He has been also, gathering feedback primarily from the Chamorro community about their concerns with the culture and the language, or the state of the people and their livelihood. So he also hovers between different language groups, helping to support what they do and have a better understanding, of what we're doing collectively for the Chamorro language. We also have Carmen Taimaño. She is an author, actually. She published at least 3 books. I know she has maybe 1 or 2 more books that haven't been published.
And isn't she a member of the Chamorro Dictionary Revision Committee?
Yeah, she was there from the start.
I didn't realize she was an author. That's incredible.
Yeah,
okay.
She's also a poet. We had the opportunity to hear her share a poem last week during the Chamorro Carolinian Identity Conference.
I think it's time to have Carmen back on the show so she can share this other side of herself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, she is steeped in there with, helping to promote and advance the Chamorro language. So we're really excited to have her. And then we also have John Del Rosario. Mm-hmm. So everyone should know Mr. Del Rosario as a prolific writer. He was a former Saipan Tribune publisher, and for many, many years, I don't know exactly how many years, but I suspect 40 years, he's been writing in Chamorro, in the editorials, or as an opinion piece. And in my experience, that has touched a lot of lives in many ways, and so it'd be great to hear. He's a journalist. From his perspective, the successes and challenges, with his approach to promoting the language and keeping it in use, in that journalistic style. With the Amalawa Malilil Rafalawash, we have Melvin Faisal. He's the executive director for the Chamorro Language Commission. We also have John Tagabuel. He's with the Carolinian Affairs Office. We have Felix Rabalaman. He's a music teacher for Hapud Middle School.
Yes.
And he's doing a lot of great things there with the youth. And we also have Tom Tebuteb, longtime educator, still very involved with any concerns having to do with the language and culture and the Rafalawash community. And then we have Patricia Capileo, who runs the language immersion program at Cagman Elementary School. So those are our panelists so far in terms of the Chamorro and Rafalawash languages.
Tell us a little bit, as we come to the end of the show, about the Garapan Heritage Trail.
The Garapan Heritage Trail features some 21 historic sites throughout Garapan, from the machine gun pillboxes near the 13th Fisherman Monument, heading north on Beach Road, the Japanese jail, the Sugar King Park. There's at least like 4 historic sites of interest in that park alone. The museum, the bell tower. There's ancient laddie stones that are standing in Garapan if people don't already know about it. So at least the one near Duty Free, we've put up a sign so people know.
And this information is going to be, or is available online in multiple languages for people who want to walk the trail, basically.
Right. So we have interpretive signs at the site and an interpretive map online. So if you go to GarapanHeritageTrail.com, you'll see the map that has more information about each site that you can link on or click on. The map online, as well as the physical signs at the sites, are in several languages: English, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. Yeah. So we received a grant. So this project started 9 years ago with a grant from the Department of Interior, followed by a grant from the Marianas Visitors Authority, who actually funded the aspect of the project that allowed us to put physical signs at each of the sites. We're having a tour where we've gotten some buses to bring people to most of the sites. And this will be on October 11th from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Because of limited spacing, it's by invite only. So we are reaching out to key community members. But if you want to join the tour and want to find out if there's still space, you can always call our office, 235-4785, to find out if you can get on the tour.
So if people would like to see the full details of the activities for the month, where can they find this information?
It's on our website, also on our social media accounts, Facebook.
So that's nmhcouncil.org,
yes,
or on Facebook, 670 Humanities.
Yes.
I'd like to give you the opportunity for any closing thoughts before we go, including, if you would, please mention the Council's plans to solicit more feedback from our listeners and other people in the community who are interested in the humanities to help set the path for what the Council will be doing in the coming years. How can our listeners participate in that process?
Okay, great. Thanks for asking. We have a 5-year strategic plan, and we're coming to the end of that 5-year period next year. So throughout the upcoming year, we will be reaching out to the community to get their feedback in terms of, we want to know, what interests them in terms of our current programming, but also if they feel we should be doing more in some other areas. The humanities is just it's a very broad, it picks up multiple disciplines, right? But essentially it has a lot to do with better understanding our experiences as people that live in our Commonwealth. And sometimes it's difficult for us as a council to focus on certain areas. But if the community feels there's some pressing issues that they would like us to approach from the humanities perspective, we're very open to that. We want to be driven by the community's needs and interests, as it says in our mission. So beginning in October, we are embarking on a strategic planning process. We're working with the University of Guam's Dr. Troy McVeigh. He's also a part of Humanities Guam. He's a board member there, former chair. He's going to help us facilitate this process, facilitate focus groups on Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. So we will be reaching out to probably between 6 to 10 people on each of our islands, inviting them to come in and meet with Troy McVeigh and some of our board members. We'll ask them some questions about, how they feel about our programming and what other areas or topics they feel are important for us to touch on, at least in the next 5 years.
All right. Well, any other thoughts before we go?
Well, I just want to thank you, Catherine, for, being steadfast here in your role, hosting your Humanities Half Hour. It's always a pleasure to hear your voice on air. And, of course, you bring important information and stories to all of us, and the public should know this. Catherine, she does sometimes come to us for advice for who to reach out to, but for the most part, she does a pretty good job at knowing who needs to be interviewed, right? The sense of urgency for getting certain individuals to share their story on air, she does a great job at it.
Thanks, Leo. I need to have you back more often for all these accolades. Well, I really have to give it back to all of our guests. I'm just here to facilitate them sharing their perspective, their experience with the humanities. And so without them, we wouldn't have the show, really. And thank you for finally making it on the show. And,
thank you for having me.
For sharing what's coming up during this October CNMI Humanities Month. Our guest today has been Council Executive Director Leo Pangelinan. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, Catherine.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. You can contact us at nmhcouncil.org or on Facebook at 670 Humanities. And if you'd like to hear more Your Humanities Half Hour episodes, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Northern Marianas Humanities Council. This has been Your Humanities Half Hour. I'm Catherine Perry.
This program was supported by a We the People grant awarded to the Northern Marianas Humanities Council from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment for the Humanities or the Northern Marianas Humanities Council.